So in terms of the timeline of this, it's almost sort of going from a really big loss in the franchise's history. Like you mentioned, Lisa, they had their third straight championship loss, and it was to the Washington Spirit just on November 20th, just on Saturday. We did a recap of all that. And then there was a Sunday that passes by, and here we are on a Monday with this news, and some things sort of kick off. The Red Stars losing that championship on a Saturday night, and then that Sunday night, nearly midnight in Chicago in terms of Central Time. The Chicago Red Stars release a statement. So there's a press release that gets put out very, very late at night, and it indicates the following: that the Chicago Red Stars head coach Rory Dames will be resigning. And as the club emailed the press release to the media, that is where it stood. There was no official announcement or release pushed out on their socials. It was directly to the media. And within the context of that email and that release, it was just it didn't give a lot. It just sort of said it was just very suspicious in terms of the timing of it. And it's really unfortunate because that almost, I think, Lisa, was a little bit of the reflection of the state of the league. That people's reaction ultimately to that news coming out last night, because a lot of West Coast people ended up, putting it out there first because of the time difference. The immediate reaction to that was like, well, this is suspicious. Why is this coming out so late? This is via the inbox of various media involved in the space. There's nothing more on their official club social channels. And within that statement, it said that it's a resignation, that Rory Dames is cited in a quote within the press release saying that, effective today, refocusing my attention to my family and future endeavors, I'm resigning as coach of the Chicago Red Stars. And then it just goes on to just sort of talk a little bit about all of his, it uses words like remarkable. It uses words like excellence and leadership and etc. These are all things that read a little bit different after reporting comes out. And I think something else that sort of reads a little bit heavier post all of this current publishing is that within this statement, it's a collective club quote that's in there. It is not cited to majority owner Arnim Whistler. It is not cited to anyone else in the club. It literally just says, under Rory's leadership, we've been a remarkably consistent and excellent club on the field. We continually evaluate our team and front office environment, and given the dynamic change underway in the league, it is time to begin the next chapter of the Red Stars with a search for new leadership of the team, said the Chicago Red Stars. And it closes out with another, sort of awkward line saying more details regarding the search process and other changes to the organization will be made search. So it ends with I don't want to call it a promise, but it ends with a to be continued, that there's going to be a coaching search and other changes to the organization. So this is all deep in the night, as obviously as people wake up this following day on Monday. I was almost like an aura, as if like people are waiting for something else. There again, it's officially the next day. There is nothing on official club channels, Lisa. And then we start to see there's reporting out of the Equalizer that is suggesting that the Red Stars ownership was aware Rory Dames will be stepping down following the championship, tweeting out multiple sources tell the Equalizer that the Red Stars leadership knew of Dames's impending exit from the team prior to Saturday's championship match. And then you have the official story coming out from the Washington Post from Molly Hensley Clancy. And again, within this story, there are 7 players that are within this larger reporting. Three of them are on record in discussing their experiences with this head coach. And throughout this entire piece, it absolutely details, controlling, berating, humiliating stories of the players and all of these breaking of boundaries of the player-coach relationship. And I think you and I, Lisa, something that we were reading through this and trying to process ourselves was was within the middle of this reporting and talking about and reading and learning that all of these things, that players in 2018 went to the US Soccer Federation with these complaints directly about this specific coach, not the NWSL. And at the time, the United States Soccer Federation was the managing partner of NWSL. They oversaw the league, supported it financially, right, through allocated funds specifically for the United States national team players who, if we're looking at the timeline a little bit, Lisa, post 2017, 2018, Christen Press was a member of the Chicago Red Stars from mid 2014 to the end of 2017. So having the timeline, it was a little like, oh my goodness, like the fact that the component that everything that we've been learning throughout this year about sort of the breakdown of the league and maybe its lack of resources, right? We saw a similar angle that came into play during the Athletic and Meg Linehan's reporting during with Sinead Farrelly and Mana Shim, that there was difficulty in finding things like an HR department, So in 2014, Christen Press was with this team, and so she had these experiences and went on to further talk about that. And then former players Jen Hoy and Samantha Johnson also go on record within this piece, going into their own experiences with Rory Dames as under his tenure as Chicago Red Stars. But I think the biggest thing that also comes out of this, as these players, Lisa, are talking about their experiences, something that they highlight is that nothing happened after these allegations were brought forward. They brought these forward, and Rory Dames has kept coaching since 2018.
I think that's one of the most shocking things. I mean, kind of looking at how this all unfolded with the press release being released in the middle of the night. I think a lot of people that have been following this league throughout this year were waiting. Why is this dropping in the middle of the night? What else is going to come out about Chicago, potentially Rory Dames? I think that's fair to say that I was waiting and saying, what else is going to happen? When is the other shoe going to drop? And the fact that this was first reported by Christen Press in 2014, not officially. It wasn't a formal complaint at that point, but Christen Press, she spoke up about Dames at that point with then president of US Soccer, Sunil Gulati, and saying that Dames created a toxic workplace and it was a toxic environment on the team, yelling at players. And she expressed that she thought this was harassment in 2014. That is so long ago. And she was dismissed at that point. And she was an employee of US Soccer, being on the US women's national team. She's one of those allocated players that gets her salary paid for by US Soccer, not by the club that she plays for at the time, Chicago. So she went to her bosses and expressed these complaints. And she was just dismissed without anything to be done for it. And I think that's important to kind of note. And so after expressing these concerns that Press did, then in 2017, still playing for Chicago, she expressed that she wanted to be traded. She did not want to be playing for him anymore because she already expressed that she felt that his actions were abusive and it was harassment for other players that she was witnessing and everything that was unfolding. And then so 2017, she asked to be traded. And then in 2018, a year later, she did resubmit and re-talk to authorities to submit a formal complaint. But that didn't matter because she was still silenced. It didn't matter. Press still was silenced. It did say in the reporting that this 2018 formal complaint about Rory Dames did spark an investigation because Press said she wanted to protect her teammates. And I think that's something that is to be taken note of, that in situations like these, it's not the players that are the superstars or getting a lot of minutes, but it's those that come forward with a voice to protect their teammates that are experiencing the harassment and the abuse. And Press is one of those players that did that and tried to speak up for her teammates. And the fact that it did spark an investigation gives a little bit of hope And as you mentioned at the top of this episode, that there were several players that came forward and saying that they wanted to tell their stories to U.S. Soccer Federation, saying that I'm willing to recount what I've witnessed on myself and on my teammates and everything. But no apparent action was taken from that, and U.S. Soccer continued to have Rory Dames be coaching, and there was no formal investigation that was made known to players or any follow-ups that were done from US Soccer. No one reached out to those players that came forward and said anything to them again after that. It was almost like, great, you've made this a formal complaint and formal investigation was launched, but we're going to keep him in the coaching circle and he's going to continue to stay at his post, and it's not going to be known to anyone, which is unfortunately a theme that we're seeing throughout the league. And now it's stemming to US Soccer, which is even higher above than the league and then NWSL.
Yeah, and I think as we're going through the timeline of things, it's that rang the loudest, I think, for you and I as we were going through this piece together, and it just knowing that some allegations were brought forward, right, and an investigation apparently was conducted, but ultimately just didn't go anywhere, question mark. And so that is sort of where it sort of came up and then it just died. But when those things happen, um, people are informed of that. So whether the allegations, or investigations, people were informed. So Red Stars majority owner Arno Whistler was, according to this reporting, made aware of these investigations against Dane, but was unavailable for comment on the reporting. But we're talking about something that came up in 2018 that was clearly stemming from the very early days of the club's existence. And we're talking about it now, nearly at the end of 2021. It's almost 2022. And within the reporting, there was a team spokesperson, Natalie Bauer-Luce, who said that the team actually never received any final report on the outcome of that investigation or any official recommendations from U.S. Soccer on moving forward, and further said that the team had taken steps on its own to try and address what it understood to be the concerns. And so you can kind of maybe look at that and say there was an attempt, but it seems very minimal. When we're looking at sort of the very stark allegations, they're big. And so when you're looking at sort of the actions that the team tried to take, like, for example, they cited shifting coaching responsibilities, adding regular player surveys for the season, like the seasons, I guess, in terms of exit interviews, as small things to try to, put in change for players at the club in light of that investigation. So we're sort of looking at this, and you're sort of look like it's like in an angle in which it's like you have the knowledge now that you didn't know then.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it echoes much, much louder when you do have that knowledge and you look at all this and you go, wow. So no. So according to the team spokesperson, there was no final report or official recommendations for next steps. So the team made an attempt to try to take some steps of their own, but things like shifting coaching responsibilities and adding player surveys, like, was that enough? And we're here in 2021, and people are having the knowledge and having the resources to say, no, that's actually not enough when you're talking about something like protecting players. So further on, press, other players have criticized U.S. Soccer's own handling of that investigation. Players wanting to tell their stories had actually never heard responses. The federation didn't follow up with them on the investigations, and ultimately led to a feeling of, being powerless. Press is quoted in this piece saying that she was terrified of Rory Dames, of what he would do and say if he found out that there was something and being said and that it was tied directly to her. So that's another theme that we're seeing throughout this, is that constant fear of retaliation that players have with their coaches, even if they are former coaches. It's devastating.
And I think we see that, and we touched on it, that Rory Dames was a youth coach in Chicago. He is a youth coach in Chicago through the Eclipse Soccer program. So a lot of players that he recruits for Chicago, he's known them for a very long time, and because of that, it's almost like a culture that really happened around them. And because of a coach that is so powerful, it's also noted in this article, which I think is a really interesting point, is that Chicago doesn't have a GM. So Rory Dames, the head coach, is in charge of making trades, of drafting players, of deciding who's doing anything. It is him. He is the sole responsibility person to call all of those shots. So if he doesn't want you on the team anymore, or he doesn't want you to be traded or anything, it's his call and his call alone. There's no one to check him on that. And whereas in other clubs, there's a GM to do that and kind of oversee that change in player personnel. So it's not surprising that Press felt powerless against him. And even after she first said something in 2014, nothing was done about it, and they told her, just let it go, this is what happens at the professional level. And then again in 2018, when she came forward again using her name against him and with these accusations, and still nothing happened. Yeah, that's the definition of powerless, when you open up and you confess something and nothing has happened and it feels like no one is listening. And she even went on to say, for so many women in this league, you just think you don't have any worth. And if you stand up and if you say what you think is right or wrong, that nobody cares. And that's devastating. And I think we've seen that really unfold throughout this season in the NWSL off the pitch, with everything that has been revealed about coaches. And we said it at the top, this is the 5th NWSL male coach that has been removed from their position due to accusations and investigations that have been happening,
Yeah.
which is just ridiculous that it's taken this long. And then even as all of these things were happening this summer with Richie Burke and Paul Riley, former coaches in the NWSL, like, did Chicago not know? Did they keep hiding things? I think that there's just a lot of distrust that has happened, and it's been echoed throughout the last few months. Protect the players. And this is a very firm example of no protection for the players, and really what has happened. So after
Yeah.
all of this news really dropped and everything happened today on this Monday,
We're starting to see or we're continuing to see reaction.
we are seeing
Yeah.
reactions, and they're continuing to come. And as we said, this is Monday evening, we're recording this, so I'm sure more will be to come. But I think it's important to note that Chicago Local 134, the Chicago supporters group of the Red Stars, they did put out a statement on Twitter. But it was a very firm statement in that they were reiterating things that they had said months ago to the Chicago front office. They were reminding Chicago front office and fans of the demands that they presented to them almost 2 months ago, after the first stories of manipulation and abuse came out in the league. They reshared their demands on Twitter, some of them making sure that there's an HR system in place for these players to go to and have trust within the front office, asking who exactly is on the NWSL board of governors. Who are those people? And do they have checks and balances? Is someone keeping an eye over the power that they have to continue to hire coaches like this, or to see investigations and know about them and do nothing about it? Again, asking for transparency, something that has been echoed throughout the league, from players to supporters groups to fans to media, and just a number of things to make sure that there are power checks in situations like this, that if you're sitting at a board or an owner's table, that you have someone there making sure that the knowledge that you have is correct and safe, and that you're doing everything you can to protect the players. So I think that statement from Chicago Local 134 was huge, just to kind of reiterate all of their demands that they want from the league, and not changing any of them, saying the same things that they were saying months ago, that they need to protect the players.
Yeah, absolutely. It just goes in line with everything this league has found themselves faced with.
Mhm.
There is a deep, deep distrust of the protocols that are in place or were lacking or non-existent, when it comes to the players in this league and the lack of protections that are in place for them. We're seeing that's not uncommon. That the main supporters groups of clubs that have had to go through all of the off the field things this year have all had these sort of collective statements from their respective officials supporters group, and it's not shocking to see that Chicago's also had a sort of statement with a list of demands ready to go in light of the news dropping. Uh, and that also includes the NWSL Players Association. We're seeing them react to this as well. Also, putting out a statement themselves on Monday evening. They state that this type of coaching has no place in the National Women's Soccer League, youth soccer, or anywhere else. We stand with Christen Press, Jen Hoy, Sam Johnson, and any player who comes forward to speak out of abuse of any kind. We've said it before and we'll say it again now. The system has failed us. Through our investigation, we will seek out the root causes of this systematic failures to prevent this from happening to future generations. Nothing short of complete transformation of our league will suffice. And it's very powerful unified statement coming from the players union. And again, them as well. Also, really finding their place in all of this alongside still having to go through ongoing CBA negotiations. It's insane to think about while you're trying to enter into your first ever collective bargaining agreement, that adjacent to that, you're having to release statements, issue support, issue resources for minimum things like protection of your players. It is unreal to me that this is something that we are having to react to still.
I agree. I mean, you think it's the bare minimum asking for support for players and that they be protected. And I know we kind of just ran through that timeline of how everything unfolded, but I think it's important to kind of call out some of the behavior that he has been accused of. There's many different phases of it and many different levels of it, and what was reported on everything from really blurring that line between player and coach, and texting players at all hours of the night, asking to spend significant time with them outside of soccer, grabbing lunch with them, grabbing dinner with them, frequently alone, personal and public attacks on these players, and verbal attacks that he did and that players witnessed, whether it was to them or to their teammates, and using personal information against players to kind of hit them where it hurts. And due to that, it was painful and humiliating at practice, after training, in the locker room. Even sexist attacks that were happening at players. One account, even him yelling at someone that, if you can't even talk on the field, what kind of mother are you? Just horrible things that you don't, of course, want to be said about you and yelled at you at your place of work. But I think it's really important to note that in this article, that players said that these were their friends, these were their teammates, and then they didn't want to see them hurt like this. It just, so many things that he went through.
And doing that, and you reference one particular moment in this story about using the personal attacks against other players, but like doing that in front of literal your colleagues at this
Yeah.
point. That's their job. Their job is to be a pro soccer player, so their teammates are actually also their colleagues as well. So it's like you're doing this in front of people, and it's just so devastating. And it's not even it was bored. It was like touching. It was almost like you're going through these things, Lisa, these allegations, and it's almost you're going through them, and it's almost like they're checking every
Mhm.
single box because it's talking about painful, public, humiliating, sexist. There are allegations within there of racist attacks from this coach, calling players trailer trash, players deliberately choosing to omit personal information about their personal lives for fear that this coach would literally use it against them. And then withholding things like information about time off, team meetings, and utilizing that the player saying that utilizing that sort of power as a form of publishment, saying, oh, we're going to have this type of meeting, whether it's one-on-one or group, and it's going to be all day, but not actually giving a schedule. And you actually, now you need to be ready within a few minutes. And so that messes the mental game, the mental tax that puts on these players in the league. It's devastating. And it's like going through this, like you and I doing this, Lisa, it's like, okay, so here's checking this box and then checking that box and checking this other box. Like if this was like misconduct coaching bingo card, it's like almost like the whole card would be full. It's devastating to read all this.
It is devastating. And knowing that he was doing this to grown adult women and trying to, I think it was noted in the article, trying to have control over them like they were young girls, and not letting them do things, not letting them see their family or their significant others. That's not a safe environment. That is not a safe working environment. And players realized that, and they tried to do something, and they tried to enact change within it, going to who they thought could protect them in US Soccer Federation, and being let down by their employers and really the head of soccer in the United States, not helping them, not standing by their sides, not protecting the players.